Kathan opening the sutra. The Dharma incomparably profound and infinitely subtle is rarely encountered even in hundreds of thousands of millions of ages. Now we see it, hear it, receive and maintain it. May we completely realize the Tathagata's true meaning. Okay. All right. Well, good morning. Friday. That was a nice sit. I've been having a hard time sitting. I don't know about you. Last night, this morning, it was hard to sit. Was it the same for you? No?
No, yeah, this past hour or 30 minutes.
Was challenging? Yeah, everybody's different, right? For me, this past half hour was great. Great in terms of just being peaceful and not too many thoughts running around, you know? So, but, you know, the practice is to just sit with whatever's there, right? Whether it's pleasant or unpleasant without having judgment about it and just being with whatever's there. And sometimes that's hard, like it was for me last night, but that's okay. It's all right. So yeah, Roshi gave a wonderful talk yesterday, really wonderful, and about emptiness, and emptiness being intimacy, which also for me is the first time I've heard it put that way, but it makes sense, absolutely makes sense. Yeah. And I was thinking about a couple of days ago, you know, talking about Upalavana. And I just remembered, you know, she had a bluish tint to her skin, which means she was very dark, right? So that there was this bluish tint. And Upalavana means blue lotus. And at the conference, which was a really, I mean, I was really energized, as I said, at the conference because people were being very articulate about how they felt and what they thought, especially the people of color there. So remembering that Upalavana, who was very dark, was one of two of the Buddha's foremost female disciples. So that's a beautiful thing. The other woman was light-skinned, which shows that the Buddha included everyone. Very inclusive. Of course, she was very skilled as well, a psychic, very realized woman. So the question was, what are we really willing to do to be free? Or what are we really willing to give up, throw away to be free? That's such a great question. So I think that we really have to be able to see our conditioning, which is hard to see. So for people of color, they're studying and learning about themselves and about their ancestors, what their ancestors went through. And they highly recommend that Caucasians, white people also, really get to know your ancestors and what happened to them, the history. That's really important because in America, a lot of people don't know their roots. And I'm just getting to know what my roots are, because it was never really talked about growing up. But it's very interesting. I found it very interesting. And Norman Fisher says, I just love quoting Norman Fisher because he's such a great teacher. But he says, to really practice is to throw away and go beyond our conditioning. But if you don't know what your conditioning is, how do you do that, right? So you have to really study and know. But I think that's beautiful. Go beyond our conditioning of who we think we are. Who we think we are. And he says, and really truly become Buddhists. Right? Buddhists who believe in basic goodness, our Buddha nature. Everybody has this basic goodness and Buddha nature. So if we have this, why do we feel unworthy? That's a good question. And he says for no self, right? The Buddha's teaching of no self, right? He says that means that we can't afford to be limited by our sense of who we think we are. We cannot afford to be limited by our sense of who we think we are. We need self-esteem that is off the charts. We need self-esteem that is off the charts. I love that, right? We do. And if we don't, well, I can speak for me. If I don't practice, I never see. I'm pretty unconscious when I walk around. And I'm in this trance of unworthiness. Brene Brown calls the trance of unworthiness. And my inner critic is busy, busy, busy. So I have to send loving kindness to my inner critic, All right, you can relax a little bit. You're safe, I'm safe, I'm healthy, I'm happy, I'm doing what I need to do. So that's, are we really prepared to throw out our conditioning to be free? It takes a little bit of work. Yeah. So I'm reminded of my La'au Lapa'au teacher, Papa Henry Awai, which I don't know if you met Pix. Did you meet my teacher? You did. Oh my gosh, great. Yeah, Pix stayed with us in Hawaii for a while when we were, starting our Zen Center of Hawaii. And, I was studying with Henry Awai, who was this the first male healer in a long line of Hawaiian women, his genealogy, which he knew, his genealogy, and they were the head healers of all the healers of the different islands. His great-great-grandmother was. And the first class, you know, we were studying about traditional Hawaiian plants as being medicine for healing. And he always said healing was 80% spiritual, 20% the plants. And the first class, he said, these are 5 expectations I have for you, students who want to learn La'au Lapa'au. The first one was ho'olohe, to listen. I think that's what we're doing on the cushion a lot. We're listening. A lot of it is all kinds of things going on, bearing witness. And then as that settles down, then we can bear witness to some deeper feelings and thoughts. The second is ho'omakaukau, to be prepared. And that's what we're doing on the cushion. We are preparing ourselves to be receptive, to see our Buddha nature and be able to bear witness, to be on the spot. Because in life, all kinds of things come up. How can we be on the spot and be skillful? Ho'omakaukau, to be prepared. The third is ho'omaikai, to respect all. And he didn't have a lot of commentary. He's just had these 5 things on the flip chart. He said, this is it. This is what I expect you to practice. Okay, so through time, I was like, okay, I have no idea what those mean, but maybe, you know, with time, like our lives and koans, we start to understand what's going on. To respect all, everything, even what we consider negative things that arise in our life, even people who rub us the wrong way. To respect all. Ho'olauna itamea maikai, this is to sacrifice. And then it's like, sacrifice what? But he gave an example. When you are healing someone who is very ill, you have to sometimes fast and pray, like meditate, just kind of quiet down yourself. You didn't go into detail, but that's all he said. You just have to sacrifice. And I've come to think also, come to sacrifice what we consider to be right. Our opinions. Can we sacrifice that? Can we sacrifice, that's self. Can we sacrifice our egos? That's a good practice to understanding this no self business. And the final, ho'o manawa nui, to be patient. Isn't that fabulous? To be patient as you practice all of this. That is what we're doing here in Sesshin by sitting still. We are practicing patience. And all of the difficult kinds of situations we run up against helps to sharpen our patience sword. I don't know if sword is the right image there, but our patience, it's helping. If we did not have those situations, we would never practice patience. We'd be playing somewhere, which is not a bad thing. I believe in balance. So for me, sacrifices come to mean letting go of things that do not serve. limiting thoughts. But we have to see them. So I wanted to share, I wanted to first share this koan, another koan from the Hidden Lamp. 2,500 years of awakened women. All right, this one is Chiyono's No Water, No Moon. Chiyono's No Water, No Moon. I printed out this, where is it? Okay. There's a beautiful woodcut of Chiyono, which I'm not sure who, oh yeah, Yoshitoshi did this woodcut. It just printed out really small, but you can see it here. I'll pass it around and maybe somebody can hold it up to the camera there for pics to see. But if you Google Chiyono's Chiyono, it will come up. It's a beautiful woodcut. How's that? It's kind of blurry, huh?
Could you hold it back a little bit?
Come back a little bit. Ooh, oh, there. There, okay. Oh, yeah.
Oh, there. Now it can come forward.
Isn't
Now,
that beautiful?
now it can come forward.
Forward a little bit, go closer, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, fabulous.
Isn't that beautiful?
Yeah.
Chiyono's No Water, No Moon is the name of the koan.
Oh, who's the artist?
Yoshitoshi, a woodcutter. And this is Japan, 13th century. It's from a koan collection called the Shonan Kato Roku. And also Paul Reps and Nyogen Senzaki's Zen Flesh, Zen Bones. Paul Reps used to live in Waimea, which I never had the opportunity to meet him before he died, which was such, anyway, I lost another opportunity there, all these opportunities that yeah, he lived in Waimea. I know, right? I know, Pix, she was there too. Yes. So Chiyono is an interesting woman. We chanted the names of the female ancestors this morning. I wanted to do that because she is also known, her Dharma name is Mugai Nyodai. Mugai Nyodai, who we chanted in the female ancestors. And this was, she lived between 1223 and 1298. She was the daughter of a samurai warrior. And she was the first Japanese woman whose enlightenment was recognized and who received transmission in the Rinzai lineage from the Chinese Zen master Wu Shu Zhu. Anyway, I cannot pronounce these Chinese names. That was something, wasn't it? Chanting the Chinese ancestors. Anyway, it's a respectful way, right, to use their Chinese name. Master Wuzhu Zuyuan. And he was the founder of Engakuji Temple, and he arrived in Japan from China in 1280. So Mugai Nyodai founded several convents in Kyoto, including KIG, the leading women's monastery in Japan's medieval period. So this was Chiyono, and I'll read this. Chiyono was a servant in a Zen convent who wanted to practice Zazen. This was early. One day, she was like in her 20s. One day she approached an elderly nun and asked, "I'm of humble birth. I can't read or write and must work all the time. Is there any possibility that I could attain the way of Buddha even though I have no skills?" So there's different stories of Chiyono. Some say, she was the daughter of a samurai, and this one is like she's a woman from a poor place. So the nun answered her, "This is wonderful, my dear. In Buddhism, there are no distinctions between people. There is only this. Each person must hold fast to the desire to awaken and cultivate a heart of great compassion. People are complete as they are. If you don't fall into delusive thoughts, there is no Buddha and no sentient being. There is only one complete nature. If you want to know your true nature, you need to turn toward the source of your delusive thoughts. This is called Zazen." We are turning toward the source of our delusive thoughts. What is that anyway? The source of our delusive thoughts. What? Brain, mind, something, right, that generates those thoughts, besides the whole body being, right? Chiyono said with happiness, "With this practice as my companion, I have only to go about my daily life practicing day and night." So the story is, they said, just do your work, which was chopping wood and carrying water, all right? And that's your Zazen. And so that's what she did, which was quite hard work. And then one day she kind of peeked into the zendo and she saw all these different people sitting meditation. And so she asked the nun again, "Do you think I could learn how to sit meditation?" And then the nun finally said yes and gave her instruction. And so she started to sit. So after months of wholehearted practice, and also the story is she was practicing hard, but just nothing was happening, no realization, and she was getting like really depressed about it, and it's like, it's not gonna ever happen to me, and she was practicing hard. So after months of wholehearted practice, she went out on a full moon night to draw some water from the well. The bottom of her old bucket, held together by bamboo strips, suddenly gave way, and the reflection of the moon vanished with the water. So she saw the moon in the bucket of water. When she saw this, she attained great realization. Her enlightenment poem was this: "With this and that, I tried to keep the bucket together, and then the bottom fell out. Where water does not collect, the moon does not dwell." I'll read that again. "With this and that, I tried to keep the bucket together, and then the bottom fell out. Where water does not collect, the moon does not dwell." So that's the koan. Now, again, remember there are reflections by Zen teachers about the different koans, because in our regular koan collection that we do, it's pretty much men Zen masters and their students. So it's really quite refreshing to have this book here of koans that Sue Moon and Florence Kaplow researched all over, finding these koans, and new ones are being translated into English. So Merle Kodo Boyd has a reflection on this, and I wanted to do this because she just died in February of this year. And in The Lion's Roar, her teacher, when Roshi Wendy Egyoku Nakao, who was the abbess of the Zen Center of Los Angeles, who is our mother temple, where Maizumi Roshi practiced and started with his successors. She wrote a beautiful piece for Lion's Roar on her student, Merle Kodo Boyd's. And she says, and she was a Black woman, that she passed peacefully at her home in Durham, North Carolina on February 20th. And she was the first fully transmitted African-American Zen teacher in the United States. So this is her reflection. For several years now, I have kept a picture of Chiyono and her bucket on the bulletin board above my desk. It is a delicate 19th century woodblock print of a young Chiyono standing in pale moonlight, a bottomless bucket at her feet, a puddle of water spreading across her path. The artist is Yoshitoshi. I was drawn to Chiyono's verse the first time I heard it. I was seized by the words, "With this and that, I tried to keep the bucket together." But I did not know that she is also thought to be Mugai Nyodai, whose name we chant in our morning dedication to our women ancestors. She was the first Japanese woman to receive Dharma transmission and founder of the first Zen Buddhist convent in Japan. When I first heard Chiyono's verse, I had been practicing for 10 or 12 years. I was keenly aware of the constant tension of keeping the bucket together. I understood that the intent of practice was to relax my grip on the old bucket, but conditioning runs deep and the sense of personal identity is strong. Hearing the words "with this and that," I felt the exhaustion of years of vigilance, all aimed at protecting my idea of myself. I felt the exhaustion of being my own obstacle. Our Zen practice is medicine to this conditioning. All the practices within Zen challenge the illusion of the perfect bucket. Zazen, the teacher-student relationship, ritual, Sangha relationships. As much as I may wish to appear competent at all times, I cannot immerse myself in Zen practice without a willingness to come apart. Sometimes it's appropriate to stop patching things back together. What then allows us to leave the bits and pieces scattered on the ground, like the splinters of the bucket around Chiyono's feet? We are conditioned to keep the bucket from falling to pieces. Unique personal circumstances can intensify this general conditioning. I was in the first generation of Southern Black children consciously raised to enter integrated schools. In some circumstances, everything seems to ride on keeping it together, especially in public. And so we were conscientious and hyper vigilant in order to prevent disaster. I'm reminded of the Obamas, right? When they were in the when Obama was president, they were the same way. They were hyper vigilant to do things right. And yet we Zen students have chosen a path that calls us in the opposite direction. In spite of our conditioning, we are called to awareness rather than vigilance. We are on a path of no water, no moon. Our conditioning tells us that it is a risky path, and yet we sense its offer of freedom and feel called to take it. Ironically, it was precisely that conditioning of keeping it all together that gave me the courage to walk into a Zen center for the first time. I had been trained to tolerate the circumstance of being other, to maintain a public identity in places where I was allowed, but possibly not welcome. Like the schools and libraries of my childhood, Zen centers offered something that I deeply needed, a place to experience my life in the world more deeply. I hoped I would be welcome at a Zen center, and I also knew that it could be otherwise. To walk into this uncertainty, I relied on being outwardly upright while keenly aware of inner fears. As Zen students, we live between Chiyono's first two lines and her second two lines, between keeping things from falling apart and letting them fall apart. Knowing how to keep things together is a valuable skill. It was knowing how to care for things that led Chiyono to continually patch the bucket. When it fell apart, she made excellent use of that circumstance as well. Our liberation deepens with the refinement of our capacity for flexibility and discernment. Let me say that again. Our liberation deepens with the refinement of our capacity for flexibility and discernment. The liberation I was raised to seek is one aspect of the liberation we speak of in the Dharma. In the community of my childhood, our efforts were directed primarily toward gaining entrance into schools, access to employment, to housing, to services that made life more comfortable. But awareness of our essential and undeniable freedom comes with awareness that we and all things are without self. The one who is liberated must be allowed to disappear like the water and the moon. Moving between patched bucket and bottomless bucket, I can exercise my freedom to keep things together or let things come apart according to the circumstances. I have come to trust the true freedom of living where the moon does not dwell. Wow. All right. So, yes, this idea of where the moon does not dwell. Where is that? I want that. Hakuin in the 17th century evidently did a portrait of Chiyono, a hanging scroll with ink on paper. And he added this following verse to her enlightenment verse. And let me read it in Japanese first. It's a poem, a waka. Chiyo no fuga tanomishi oke no soko nukete mizu tamara neba tsuki mo yadorasu. Tonikaku ni takumishi oke no soko nukete mizu tamara neba tsuki mo yadorasu. Chiyo hoped to draw water in her bucket, but it lost its bottom, and it could not hold water, nor could it house the moon. No matter how you look at it, when the bottom of the bucket falls away, it will not hold water, nor will it house the moon. So yes, this idea about the moon's reflection and how we're always looking, it seems, at reflections versus looking at the reality of things, right? Because when you see the reflection of a moon, like in that bucket of water or in a pond, is that the moon? Right, right. So that bucket falling apart was an opportunity to see reality as it is. She could now see truth versus our projections. We project all the time. So that was her enlightenment when the bucket fell apart and all the water drained out, which she was, trying to keep that old bucket together. Yeah, no self, letting go of the self. So that we can really be intimate with one another, with our whole experience. Otherwise, the self just kind of keeps getting in the way. And that's all we see. So that's why I was so taken by this fierce vulnerability, because when you can let go of yourself, I feel that's when you can be really vulnerable. Because if you have something to protect, it's hard to be vulnerable. because you're on guard. Right? So I don't know if you took a read of this fierce vulnerability considerations, but the person who offered them is a Kingian nonviolence practitioner in the tradition of Martin Luther King and nonviolence. So when I read this, I felt like it was a little more detail for how we practice the three tenets of not knowing, bearing witness, and then the action that arises when we really do those first two tenets well. So I'm just going to read them, and I think we can just, maybe we can have a little discussion about it. The first one is, conflict is the spirit of the relationship asking itself to deepen. Isn't that beautiful? Conflict is the spirit of the relationship asking itself to deepen. We will look at conflicts that surface as an opportunity to deepen in relationship, not to divide communities. What a deep practice that is, right? Yeah. And the second one is, if we knew how to be free, we'd be there already. If we knew how to be free, we'd be there already. None of us know how to do this right. We are all trying to figure it out together. Third, we have the right to be raggedy. We have the right to be raggedy. We are going to mess up, and it's okay. We are going to mess up, and it's okay, right? It's perfect. Next, our power lies in our defenselessness. Here's that vulnerability. When we feel we have nothing that we need to defend is when we are our most powerful. When we have nothing when we feel we have nothing that we need to defend is when we are at our most powerful. What? We value transparency over security. We lead with honesty and trust that people will hear, see, and witness us in our full humanity. That's a lot of trust there. So we really have to do a lot of work here so that we can start, be the first. We ask questions with curiosity, not an intent to critique. We ask questions with curiosity, not an intent to critique. We ask with the intention of knowing more, not with the intention to prove someone wrong. Okay, the next, safe space versus brave space. What that means. Real safety doesn't guarantee that we will not be uncomfortable. Love that. Real safety doesn't guarantee that we will not be uncomfortable. Real safety means that we create spaces that are safe enough to have brave and oftentimes difficult conversations, knowing that our relationship will only be strengthened by them. Are you going, I don't know about that one? Well, this is their practice. It's a practice, right? Next one is from woke to awakening. From woke to awakening. Awakening is a process, not a destination or a competition. All right, so do people know what the word woke mean? Okay, good, because I didn't know what it meant. You know, it came out through the African American vernacular, and it just means somebody who is conscious of racism, right? And I had a definition here. Where's my definition? Because it was so, here. Alert to injustice in society, especially racism. It's woke. From woke to awakening, it's a process, not a destination or a competition. And then next is compassion for people's ignorance. We are all continuing to learn, continuing to struggle our way out of ignorance. Ignorance is simply an opportunity to learn. Oh my God, this is good. This is such great reminders. All right, next one. One sentence can never capture the complexity of our world. Hold the complex, non-dual nature of our world and acknowledge that two conflicting truths can both be 100% true. Two conflicting truths can both be 100% true. Okay, and next, hold accountability as an act of love. Hold here is saying, they're saying, think of hold as the critical word, not accountability. Hold accountability as an act of love. We want to hold each other and create space for our growth. We want to hold each other. I feel that's what we're doing in this session container. We're holding each other in this space, this safe space for growth. And this is a healing place, though healing may not occur here. We can find healing anytime, any place, but we acknowledge that healing from trauma is a long, intense, and sacred process. And our intent in this space is not to open up and heal our deepest wounds. So that's interesting too, right? Because we think, oh, we just got to get to the bottom of this and let's just heal. But no, it's not like that. It takes time. I think it takes time and work, really working to see where is it? Where is the hurt, the trauma, whatever? And how do I heal? So these are reminders for me of how to practice the 3 tenets, a little bit more detail instead of just not knowing, bearing witness, it's just getting a little more specific and gives me it's a reminder. Oh, right. Isn't that beautiful? So everybody has a copy of this. I should put it up on the wall here. So any comments or thoughts or questions? I think now would be a good time to discuss that. We're really working with ourselves through all of this, right? That ego of ours, which is there for, because of our upbringing, no problem, it just is. Oh, good, thank you. Thank you, Joe. All right, I'll do this too here.
Testing. So I absolutely love all those points. And I believe we got a copy of it yesterday, that paper, and And I really do want to hang that up on my fridge. Or something. I think that's a great reminder to have. And really, to just be reminded of that every day is really good. The one question I had actually was on the last one, the last point made with, and I'm sorry, it said something along the lines of this is not a place of healing, or is that
For our deepest wounds.
for our deepest wounds?
Yeah, I mean, it could be, but we don't, no expectation
I see.
that we're going to heal our deepest wounds here.
I see.
You know, it might happen, but
I was just really curious about that. I don't know. It was like, one thing I've noticed, at least while sitting down, is, and yeah, I think maybe depth might be a part of it too, but I have kind of noticed, especially like, you know, when I sit down and I meditate, and I'm so, the koan that we read earlier today, I hated how much I felt like I could connect with it. Like I hated how applicable it was. Like it was so close to home that I hated it. and because I was literally meditating, and I was just so, I don't know, I was focusing on my breath, but I was just so, my mind would not, it was just like nonstop, like, is this, am I doing this right? Why am I having so many thoughts right now? Why can't I just sit down and, and so, I don't know, it's like, for me, I feel like maybe it doesn't get to the deep wounds, but it does seem to like really shed some light as to, quote unquote, what's going on. And I'm really appreciative of that too, that insight. Yeah.
right, well, good. You're really, this is your first Sesshin. I hope of, many more to come.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, this play, I mean, honestly, that's been very, I guess hearing that last point, especially I think under the context that this was my first one, I was just surprised to hear that, because I'm like, maybe I could see the distinction between the deep wounds and it taking time. But I feel like it has been very therapeutic in the sense of it's very enlightening when you just sit down with yourself. I think that's very therapeutic. And I know I had a lot of friends and family, they're all asking, when I'm done, they're all saying, hey, tell me how it is, tell me if you're, I think they might have said this somewhat mockingly, but just tell me if you're enlightened or not. And it's like, well, okay, but I am going to say, no, I think this is an experience that everyone should have, to sit down with yourself. It really doesn't happen out there that often. You get so sucked up in the day-to-day, and to sit down and have a sense of community and to be with yourself, it's very meaningful, I think. Or you'll just endlessly drift without really being aware. And that's why I think I'm very grateful and thankful, and yeah, that's just my two cents.
wow, I'm really happy that you're here, Joe. Yeah, that's a realization. That sounds like enlightenment to me.
No, honestly, it's really fantastic, and I'm really happy to be here too.
Great, yeah. It's, it's showing up and it's staying. That's what we also call bearing witness. Showing up, and then, whatever's coming up, you're just being with, not having to fix, right? Just noticing, oh God, my mind is going today. Trying to fix, and then it doesn't work, and then the bucket breaks, and then look what happened to Chiyono.
I'm gonna stop getting bamboo and trying to fix this dang bucket, okay? Because that's what I've been doing this whole time, is fixing this bucket. And I've had it.
Good.
So yeah, I love that koan. I really do.
Yes, pics.
So much that you've offered. It's hard to even, I mean, the vulnerabilities by themselves are just huge. Each one is something. And then you had all this, the big question before, what are we willing to give up to be free? That was a whole world in itself. And then the wonderful to acquaint us with these, with the blue Buddha there. And of course, it made me think of, in Tibetan Buddhism, Samantabhadra, who's the archetypal Buddha before all the other forms, like the white Tara, the green Tara, all the other forms are taken, but the primal Buddha is blue. Samantabhadra is blue. And so I couldn't help but remember that. And how beautiful that to know about these early, I mean, same, being on pilgrimage in Japan and studying them for years, never hearing any of this, right, for decades. So I just so grateful for you to bring it all forward and make it part of the wisdom that you're sharing. And then your teacher, Papa Henry, and then his instruction. So this is a many layered lotus you've offered us this morning, and I can hardly, I'm so happy that it's recorded and I'll be able to share it and with other Sangha and continue to work with it. And the big question, and yes, I think it pretty well, not hard to relate to trying to keep the bucket together. I mean, I just think that's just an incredibly viable metaphor that, as Joe just said, I'll stop trying to look around for the bamboo and trying to keep patching things up, and to see the conditioning and to have it fall away is always such a treat. Any experience that at the moment, as uncomfortable as it might be, it's like being completely wrong sometimes, the delight in being like realizing like you were complete, like when I'm somehow fairly, I mean, of course I'd like to be fairly painless, but still being completely wrong about something, you kind of go like, oh, it's such a great help in loosening the what the hoops on the bucket. Anyway, I just wanted to thank you for bringing so much wisdom to us. I can hardly even, I've taken so many notes here. I'm already kind of like all off the page. I keep kind of writing things down in the corners, and so thank you.
Thank you, kids. So glad you're doing this session with us, all the way from BC, British Columbia.
It's just a miracle to be able to be here with you.
It is a miracle. It is a miracle.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I just so happy to meet you, Joe, and
yes.
Yes.
Hogetsu is her Dharma name. Hogetsu. Hogetsu. Right, which means what, Anne? Dharma moon.
It's very nice to meet you too, Pix. I hope to be seeing you for the next one.
Yes, absolutely. Yes.
I have found, and certainly in this session and others, that it's a gift to be in a place where there's no need for me to have my stuff together. So, and so many roles that I've played, I have to have my stuff together. and, you know, mother, teacher, chaplain, clergy person, you know, you often, you know, I think the last one, now that I'm living, you know, currently with that, it's not as strong. I have to have my act together. And that's something new for me, that my public face is a person who has her act together. And to just be able to let the water flow out of the bucket and not fix the bucket is precious. So I think this came up before too, that one of the ways to help heal the world, to heal the people around me, is to be vulnerable when it's safe to be vulnerable. And when I've preached and I've revealed some of myself and been vulnerable, people have come up and said, I needed to hear that. And thank you for sharing that. Thank you for being vulnerable. And I even remember years ago, I was teaching all the uber smart kids chemistry, AP chemistry. And one of my missions was to get them to relax a little bit, to say that I'm not perfect, you're not perfect, and that's perfectly okay. But they didn't view me as being imperfect. I had all the answers. And I still remember this day when a student asked me a question, and they weren't testing me, they just had a question. Who knows what it was, some concept in chemistry. And I said, I don't know. Let me think about it. Maybe I can get back to you tomorrow. And the student brightened up and said, oh, that is so cool. Doc Smith said she doesn't know something. And I said, oh, honey, there's a lot of things I don't know. But that was healing for her. This person with this PhD from an Ivy League place, and Doc Smith teaching AP chemistry, and she doesn't know things. It's okay not to know things. So there's healing to bring to the world when we allow ourselves to not always have our stuff together. So I thought that was really cool and reminded me of how important the container of Sesshin is in not having my stuff together and being able to talk with a teacher and say, I don't have my shit together. What's your recommendation for what I do while I'm sitting, you know? That's that's healing for me too. So I appreciate that, reminding me of that.
Well, it is time for lunch. All right. Yes, so Pix, you're missing a lunch that Hogetsu prepared today while I was preparing for the talk. Yeah, something yummy. Okay, and Pix is a great cook. She used to cook for Sessions for us in Hawaii, and she'd always make fabulous meals.
Ogetsu, thank you for your comments right now about being the one that knows. And it just occurred to me how it is that I could have, I hadn't ever occurred to me before to have compassion for a leader or someone who is playing a role, to remember that like, for one thing, if they're not aware of it, what a trap it is. And also, even if they are aware of it, then it's work, just the same. And it never occurred to me really in a way to have compassion for people who are the pressure that the role puts on people. I hadn't thought of it from that place. And I want to thank you for that. That I find, thank you. It's a healing thing for me to think about some
Yes,
people
absolutely.
who, you know,
Yes,
that you can
well,
resent.
thank
They've taken on a mantle, and then you can sometimes resent them for the way they just not doing it, just, you know, so thanks.
Mhm. Yeah. Okay, prepare for lunch. Okay.
I absolutely love that book, by the way, Sensei. Honestly, I think when I love reading, and so when I get out of here, I think that's going to be one of the first.
We might have it in the bookstore.
Oh,
Yeah, go check it out. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.